like, I'm just giving her like 40 days for whatever people want to eat. Dollars. So, I mean, I think we're talking people at the front. And then you talking about it. And then we get a drink too. We're going, hey, can we get, sorry, I mean, which is 12, right? And you listen to OPA. Something tough. I don't. Check, yes. Check. Okay, let me get checkers. We have another mic here, so it's kind of tear it out. Are you good? Where's my clicker? Is this reading me? No. Is this? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Good. We have met once or twice before. Yeah. Yeah, when? It was in like a long time. Okay. Yeah. We're no. Who's going to show? You know, we're still around. Some of them are still around. Yeah. Yeah. Funny thing, I think everybody can hear what we're saying. Yeah. Yeah, the young ones are like 82, 84 now. Yes. So we're streaming, so my mic is large. Gone? Yeah. Yeah. Charlestown had an 80% demo. Westend had 100% demo. Yeah, it was like 50% of downtown was marked for demolition. I did my own jacket.
Remember, it's not necessarily All right. We got to get
But I guess the Celtics got it. Hey, hey, it's a long time. It's a long time to get here, man. My big sister, was been like 4 or 5 years. I knew this to each other. So it's like, all right, all right. Problem, problem. Mm. Cancel. Problem. The, no, it's not sure. I don't understand. It's not sure. It's not sure. This happened. This is what I'm saying. Like, I don't listen. Okay, wait. Is the thing on? Okay. Turn that back.
Share the slides. You're sharing the slides. All right. The news, so like, can you hear? Yeah, is this really? Yeah. Like, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but okay. So I want to thank you for coming here today. My name is Michael Solomon, the founder of the African American Culture Initiative, and we'll be here today for Black History Month. So we're going to make Black History Month today. And, we've been a campaign with the African American Academy. I'm called Boston Redlining 85, marking 85 years of redlining. All right. My phone. I forgot I need something for my phone. I need your so yeah, so welcome to Black History. If you've enjoyed the week, I think guys are really getting involved with Black history. Black history was 365, right? Not just, during 1 month, but we're going to make it extra special. So today with me, Sebastian Belafonte is the executive director and historian at the Westend Museum. He started at the West Museum in 2019 as a volunteer program director and became the museum's first paid staff member in 2020 and first employee in 2022. Sebastian also served as the president of the West End Civic Association and as a board member, the Massachusetts History Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So how's everything been at the West End? I know you guys in a situation where we're doing some renovations. How's that going?
Yeah, it's going okay. It's been a battle. So we had a big flood in January last year, and was a surprise. Took about 6 months to get the basic kind of like flood damage repaired. Another 6 months to get building to fix the issues that came from that. So we're just getting it back now. We're putting out for bid, and we're on track to open sometime this year.
Right. I want to thank you at the African American Academy for supporting us, supporting this effort to create, get the youth the opportunity to create heroes of their community, heroes that they grew up with, so we really appreciate it. So today we're going to do my first big wrestle. So a little bit guys before we get started. So yes, those who don't know, this is we're the African American Culture Initiative. So it's a restorative project management firm. What we do is that we design systems that build community, repair harm, and promote inclusivity in multicultural communities. So that's American Academy. The system that we do is all part of our effort to use STEAM engineering, project management as a tool to find solutions, not just talk about it, right? So that's my phone. Don't worry about it. Is that protection? So mission is to build bridges in the African diaspora with education, technology, and travel. These cultural bridges are technology and also ways of understanding, but more importantly, curriculum, right? Things that help our young people aspire to be the best that they can be. So the African American Academy is our after-school program project that we have been doing. And as an after-school summer program, we get young people to engage in history, do research, take very lovely field trips, if I might add. why are they doing this? Well, the restorative project management, executive skills, as well as learning about cultural diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And that's why we're here today, is because we know that the West End was a multicultural community. Absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But you're watching this whole thing on African TV. We want to welcome you to subscribe. African TV is a student newspaper. Newspapers on school. I'm saying age. It's a YouTube channel. And this is where the students get a platform to share their stories and tell them to speak their truth to power. Right? So we want to thank everybody for supporting, subscribe, right? Okay, so this is my comment to currency. We have some people that are still here. We're coming to for this year. So this is we went to Madison. Me and the North. So we also work with Northeastern students, and we have one of our Northeast. We have two Northeastern, former Northeastern students. He's just graduated, and he's working with us now as an associate project manager, learning the tricks of the trade. You know, we got Jeffrey, right, and Jeff. He's a new student. He just started with us like last week, and I'm really working with us to do quality assurance, quality control. For this whole black and that's the Redline 85 process, right? So we've done a lot of building that we're constantly exploring. This is African American engineering right here, and we are proud of that fact. So we have young people like this come into our system and figure out stuff and make us better. And so we got to do that with our high school group, and she now transferred over to a college. When she got to college, she was so great because she had the comfort of knowing she had a job when she got there. Okay, so and then Brianna, she's still in high school. She's at Victorian. She goes to school in Wellesley. And then we got our Northeastern students. Vashrik is here. Say hi, Vashrik. So Vashrik was with us last year. He's the first one to transfer over from one semester to the other, right? So I want to thank him for his dedication working all Christmas to make sure that this Boston Redline was going to. So please give it up for Vashrik. So, okay, so let's take a slide up, please. So, give me a second. You're going to have to transfer over in a little bit if I tell the rules. Okay. So, further prizes. Westend Johnnies for the first $50, then $30, $20. Okay, so first place, $50, Westend Johnnies, whatever you want. Second place, Westend Johnnies, whatever you want. $20, because we can touch it. So, we take these pieces. These pieces are inspired from the work we did last summer. We went to, our students went to see there was a statue right here in the plaza. And then when they saw that, it was kind of daunting because that was the only Black history in that area. Okay? We went to the Jewish Memorial, we went to Family Home, and the history was kind of vague. And, Freedom Trail and, universities, but there was really representation, except for the wrestle. When you learn the wrestle, you learn that he was a basketball player, but he wanted to be known as a man first. He treated everybody like a man. He expected people to treat him with the same dignity and respect. And one of the reasons why, so the Black Male Advancement Office, I want to send a shout out to them. They sponsor this event as well. And one of the things about why they did is because that being mature in the chest, he's the toughest of them all. The wrestler was anything but that. In fact, he was a gentle giant. right? No, no, no. Oops. Oops. All right. Come on back. Come on back. All right. Why doesn't it- I don't know why that's on. Oh, there you go. It's not really too bad. All right. That's what that's what I was worried about. All right. Let's to the beginning.
I think you're going.
You know, that's been so many times. I need to calm down. Oh, there we go. I think I hit it again. Oh, there you go. All right, hold on. We're gonna get some of this. That's my kicking values there. When we went to
Oh, yeah.
the- Okay, here we go. So, from the because it's really like I think it's like such a so I don't even know what it is. Okay, hold on, don't touch it. There we go. So think of it as standing to slide off. You can go to the tree, and if you go to the tree, you'll be able to find the limit there, and you can join the tourists. All right. Then listen carefully to the presentation. You got to the pictures, everything, because everything's got a clue. All right. And then answer the questions as accurate as possible. There's really the questions are not that difficult. You can read it, but it'll take time. All right. So I'm going to take you the plan for the top three. I need the students come and express themselves. We want to make you do that. Everyone is afterwards about what they learn. We need the community. We're going to do that this time, but I thought it was important to show you guys it lives in the challenge works. Finally, so the 85 projects. It went to 85 years since the Redline map was issued. The Redline map was issued February 1st, 1938. So this last Wednesday marked 85 years. So we have been doing community projects. So we do community projects in February and in the summer. The summer is in the fun because I was the youth. But we're working with the community to meet some certain goals, community culturally directed goals. One is awareness on, like I said, with, especially with our youth and for a curriculum around the wrestle. We want to raise funds for scholarships, especially for our students. We want to make sure that slaves and other cultural locations in Boston that survived, we want to make sure these are landmarks. It's important that everything is important enough to be recognized. Yeah, so coach recognition. Don't go to the present too much. You can get into on the website. But the idea behind this project is really to give life to a civil rights leader, a person that was a gentle giant. He was not and I think this is actually pretty just like him because he's not he would have been out here like me talking about himself. Sometimes those are the people that we have raised up because they're so quiet and gentle. They're not going to be out there making a lot of noise. All right. And we'll talk a lot about that. So this is us like we went to this is why our youth program and we went out there and we were just after he passed. So we went, so remember, looking at the pictures, because some of these pictures, the answers still in the place. So, you can see here, and yeah, so operated from slaves. And actually, The slaves was that he didn't want people saying he was a bad businessman because you see, it was really kind of like a rule because these poor people had to like they saw the community and then to do there's nothing they can really do. This enslaves organizing in the time with other community leaders, after others, you know, let me get into whatever we can do. You opened the slaves back then, you look left and right in true now. You didn't see. You didn't see that's the 20s across the street. You didn't see jazz clubs, tailors, people with hostels. That's another. There's a lot of female women leadership back then. Okay, and you look at the history of the civil rights movement, we need to put it in context, cultural context, and that cultural context is that it took us from the end of slavery to when the wrestled and then fought for our civil rights to culturally develop the gravitas, the strength, the cultural dynamism to make sure that we could get our civil rights. All right. And then when we say, well, how do we develop our culture? How do we develop our culture? We'll get to that. It's because of physicists, not an engineer. Looking at the maps, and I'm going to myself, what were these spaces used for? Because that is the roadmap to where we need to go. Whatever we were doing at the cultural height of the African American community in the 60s is where we need to look. Because when we say, well, that times change, times do change. But when the physical changes, that image change. And that's what we're here for. We're here because in the West End, exactly where we are now, there was a thriving Italian community that was so open. They had micro segregation is a new term, which means that you have real cultural hubs within this area that we see as West End, right? So basically, the North End extended all the way to Hand, like the old British, 1600 bars that they have down there. All this area was just a bunch of mic pastries and all sorts of great eating spots that were present. And my sister, welcome. You came all the way out here. Oh, my sister, the education woman. Hello, Boston historian. Huh? Yes. Thank you so much for attending. No, have a seat. Thank you so much. So, Bill Russell was part of the civil rights movement. I think most of the people who live from that area, everybody was in on it. The musicians, the clerics, everybody was, it wasn't that you're a singer and you could just be a singer. There was a movement going on. There was a cultural revolution in the church. People their practices and practices on. All right. So we have a lot of sports figures, right? And I believe this is enslaved. I don't know, but I heard that that's what I saw online. Let me just say that. Barack Obama, that's him as a pallbearer at Jackie Robinson's funeral. That's him with obviously Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That's another thing I always like to point out. The Nation of Islam was another cultural development that the African American community did within the 1865 to the 1965, right? You have Muhammad Ali, you have, what I'm saying? So there was a big cultural explosion from the end of slavery, all right? With blues, rhythm, jazz, rock and roll. These are all cultural development that happened because we had spaces, access to spaces, safe, encouraging spaces with instruments, with singing, you know how we do in the church. So these things with developing attitudes and culture and swag, straight up swag. It was here are some more pictures. When he died, I went to Slade's. I thought that there would be people there. The South's uniform. Nobody was there. I remember this, like I was seeing something, trust me, and somebody it's so great that somebody even remembers that, like, because a lot of people don't know the slaves. If you talk to them, they don't know that they also owned slaves, all right, and that it's really a civil rights hub because of who he was. He was the heir apparent to Jackie Robinson. He was the first Black superstar. Okay, so when you have a situation where you have when you have a situation where you have the first person to beat the color barrier, you have somebody who championships, the whole community is in awe, right? And that was the legacy that he did. So if you came to Boston, you did not come to see him, shame on you, or you don't know him. When you hear the stories of like how they have in the back, they had in like another building. Remember, this space in segregation, this space is very tight. You don't have the opportunity to, use space anyhow. So you have to be using, tripling. So they have this little house close by where the superstars would change. Because you obviously don't want to rooftop rolling out, right? Because the whole place would go crazy, right? So, but when all these places were starting, these were the people that ran it. So if you open the gates during that time, you would have, I'm telling you, like it was a Black Chinatown. Now, unfortunately, there are very little pictures. And this is actually something that it's like I've come against a wall.
It's very common. This is like a forever problem with any minority community is that they are way underdocumented, even if they're people that you would think are very would be.
Right. I've gone to the South End Museum, the archives, anything about our communities and the maps around 19, like right before Urban Renewal, it's like literally, I mean, it can't be. I guess this is Boston. I go to the Amphitheater. If you go to the Amphitheater, you see handwritten drawings done in the 1800s. And this were done hand printed and cut metal plates stamped on big. I mean, we documentation. One of the peculiarities when you study the Redlining stands, the Boston engineers were way better than the ones in other parts of the country. And that's just because Boston was always more educated, all right? So please switch it over. All right, so we want you to get, okay, I read my phone is under here. Okay, aircon. You have to start over again, or
Yeah, it looks like it's like stop and then start.
Really great thing, yeah. You need to get, like, you need to actually start with this. Okay, so this is the first one. Okay, so we have people signing up. All right. Hold on, let me sign up my own. So get out your phones, anybody. So this is the competition, like I said. If you guys want to participate, anybody want to participate, you can. They're not listening. So that is the code. All right, there you go. The line. So we don't want, okay. Hold on, I'm gonna change my name. I don't like this name. There you go. No, that's who I am. All right, so, okay, we got everybody signed up, everybody signed up, everybody signed up. Okay, let's go. 10 questions. All right, remember, it's about the speed. So you can't do it. When was so born? All right, we got 1 out of 7 people put in, 3 out of 7, okay? I know. I know. It's a minute 30 seconds. That's the time. It can be a minute 30 seconds.
You got 5 now.
All right. Hey, okay, you move. So, okay, are you ready? Okay, now wait for the time to pass. Is everybody done? You have 5 out of 7. Like, 2 people. Okay, maybe I'm one of them. Hold on. I think I'm one of them. Yeah, there we go. One person went. You ready? No, I can't wait. I can't wait. This is a short second. 19 seconds. Wow. Okay, all right, all right, all right. So, what was his rings? How many championships did he win? That's a so. Uh, uh, yeah, 4. I know the name. I don't know this already. The way you relaxed. Um, okay. 6 out of 7. I think I put mine in. Okay, there we go. 7 out of 7. All right, all right, all right. Championships. That's right. Somebody is good at this. All right. All right. Who is nature? Let me make the program of this picture. You've got some options there. You got some options there. Who was his direct mentor? So any stories about like
Yeah, a couple.
you got a couple.
Well, you start talking.
I'm trying to think like we have a short one.
Sure. So, I mean, you were talking about Bill being really accessible, or, well, gentle giant, right? I mean, so the stories that I was able to get, direct stories that I was able to get, came from 2 brothers whose father was one of the first referees in the NBA.
Okay.
And that it was much more casual. So they, as kids, they had access to all the players. They were in the locker room after every game.
After every game,
Yeah. So the dad had arranged this, and for one game, one of his kids was able to sit. Bill wasn't playing, so he sat with him for the whole game. And Bill kind of named for him. He was pretty young, like 6 or 7. Narrated the game for him. Bill and Red Auerbach took him out for dinner afterwards. A couple other people. And he just talked about how much respect like Red and Bill had for each other, how kind of subtle, kind of just calm they were. They really focused on like what he was saying as a little kid in the room with them, and he was a big impression on him, how just respectful they were of him.
So that took you for dinner. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. That's a great story. I mean, I can't wait to add it to our. Nice. Okay. All right, Jeff.
Hey.
What seems to be the hot corner? I don't know what they're doing inside of the building. Father Amy, Diana, sorry, Vashrik and Marvin Mao bringing in the rear. Hey, y'all. They don't see me. All right. Which event to honor the late Bill Russell did he attend? You have the presidential Medal of Freedom. Well, that's obviously not. Pictures, yeah. And the Sir Hall of Fame ceremony, Coach Hall of Fame ceremony, statue dedication, which I think we've seen a picture of the statue, so it can only be 2. It's supposed to be a thing, but some people use them, but some people on this side of the okay. How many people were that? I mean, I already know the answer. I wrote the test. All right. We have 7 to go, but it just don't. Okay. I try to wait so I make sure I'm not going to win. Yeah. One thing, so. Okay. See, we did one before, and people were complaining it was too short. So we did it to 1 minute 30 seconds, and now we're just like making this too much. That is true. They also did not go to his Hall of Fame ceremony in 1972. He accepted it in 1999, and he did it because he's not going to be like the first black person in there. You know, like I said, he's so humble. He's such a quiet person, all right? And he did not want to be like, you know, he was the first black superstar. Can you imagine? And a quiet person, right? So, Jeff. Have you've been doing research? So, did you? Don't play with me. Sorry, Jeff. My bad. All right. Next session. Which restaurant in South Athens? This is strictly speed, y'all. I've said it 100 times. I'm going to get myself a little faster because y'all don't deserve no extra time on this question. Oh, 6 out of 7. This person has got it. No. No Twitter fingers on that. 7. Everybody knew it. I was really about to point. That's what I'm trying to focus. All right, good job. All right, and this, I think that's slaves. And that's actually at slaves. And you can see, multicultural. This is not, I think it's, one of the things didn't see all that race stuff, he just wanted to be with people. And that's one of the favorite things about Bill Russell. Jeff. You see, your eligibility for this is very questionable because you are a Northeastern student and you are part of the volunteer team. Just let you know. How many people in attendance when Russell retire his number? This one, if you've listened to, I've said it 100 times, but so we have 0, 6,501. I get good numbers for I always get good numbers for my multiple choice. 13,400, 25,603, and 48,450. I don't even think that's possible in the building, but all right, we got to do my. All right. All right, we got one more person. Otherwise, I just, if money is relevant, I don't want people to. I know, yeah, good. All right. 19. Help me out. All right. Somebody, connection to connections. There we go. There we go. All right. The right answer is 0. When he retired, he was he didn't his sport, so he wore a white suit, complete white suit, and came to the thing, and only his teammates were in attendance. He later mentioned that Boston was a flea market of racism, and he really wanted them to spoil his day. Now, as the first black superstar, he was the tip of the spear. When I say, like, you having issues hearing me? Okay. So, perspective. He was the tip of the spear. So, Jackie Robinson, right? The first person to take successive seasons of success, something that never been seen before and has not been seen afterwards. He was, he was like, there are a lot of people that are trying to bring him down. For years. Yeah, haters back then, imagine that. And these people, they were screaming, false, this and that. So even Tony Wilson, who actually won the Rookie of the Year that year. Let's see, they're always listening. So, he made sure that there wasn't a single soul. And that's something I think is a very strong statement from a man who does not make big statements. There is certain silence. Because it's the thing, I always point that point out, very important to my students, especially when new kids. You somebody that then, how people you can press the most. Sometimes a lot of with nothing. That's okay. And that's what Bill Russell represented. So that's why that question is one of the most important questions we have. So, all right. It's not true about Bill Russell. Okay, obviously, hold on. Oh, that's the twice. Oh, okay. It's not here, so. All right. So, okay, is it loud? Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, see what's happening. You can see it on your phone. You can't see it on there. Look at this. I must have not hit the red button on that one. So he was supposed to speak at a June speech, but declined. He said, "Listen, racism." He never gave you that answer. He was the first black head coach in the NBA. He was the accomplished jumper. He was the rookie of the year. I've already given the answer. Stop. Stop. All right, we got four people. That's 6 well, everybody signed this time. So people trying to make it. Okay. All right. Come on, y'all. Looking like a with the head on your screen. All right. I think I'm having two minutes jam against each other. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so original polling was not true. He did not win Rookie of the Year. Tommy Heinsohn Rookie of the Year on that year, but it was because he did not play because he was injured or he did not play as many games, and that's why he didn't win Rookie of the Year. All right. Jeff. We're falling from grace. I feel you, bro. All right. Original polling is also not true about him. He has the most championships in American sports history. He won 9 straight championships. Two consecutive NCAA championships in 1955 and 1956. He captained the gold medal winning U.S. national basketball team in the 1956 Summer Olympics. And he was the first black head coach to win a championship.
This is some pressure. All right. We won 8 straight championships, not now. Gotcha. Now, this is kind of hard because I didn't know this. I had to go study this. How much did Bill Russell average in his career?
Votes up to total goal. 13.4 points, 18 rebounds, 25.6, 24.6. Wow. even these are just amazing numbers, but you sign up. I want everybody to get a chance. Okay, like I said, if I win, we all win. I guess I took a photo of that game. It's on your phone. Yeah. 4.3 assists. This man was revolutionary. Especially the rebound numbers. He's the number 6. He looks like a turtle. All right. And 8 out of 9. Wow. So this is the last one. Okay. This was a cute businessman use his space, but not his business. What is the slave restaurant used for? Somebody has to get it. You're doing good. You're fine. She doesn't come in the money. That's how we do it. People about to come. Best friend. So after this, I'll talk a little bit. So you see about the red line and show you some pictures. Some pictures that the West End Museum. We're so thankful, got the executive director of the West End Museum to be here with us. And thank you so much.
Yeah,
for understanding the importance of marking history and helping us mark our history. And with your support, with like other historical societies, hopefully we can get our young people to help present their stories. Yeah, there's so many stories that if she gives it to you, the education woman. Yes. I don't know, we can tell this. This picture with the slaves. I think so. Like having an NAACP, that's what I heard. I don't know if it's true. That's the thing. We only have these bits and pieces of the cultural history, and we have to try and piece it together. So it's all of this. They were approaching music and they were approaching a state. Like I said, if you came to and you were somebody who was slaves, so oh, this is not the bad part experience. Where did this come from? So we say you need Western. So this is things I did before. It's on here. So I thought it's okay. So basically, it's just a red go and took pictures. So I took those pictures. You guys know where this is at in Boston. You guys saw the answer. There we go. To the races, y'all. Yeah, and when it gets to 30 minutes over, we're not gonna, I'm just taking off the 30 seconds. If there's a minute, we say like 20 people, 30 people, it would be necessary. It's not, y'all can.
Extra question, I don't know how they got it. Okay, so you got 12 seconds. 9, 6, 3, 2, 1. Oh, you know what? I know why.
Because we're on the sliders thing directly.
Nice. Go back to the slides. So, yeah, obviously I have more points.
Go, remember, change over to change over, you have to switch this, well, you have to go to this tab and then, and share it. I think we are here. Okay. Let me just make sure it's on the right thing first. So. Not sure this is the beginning. I don't want to press it again. Okay, I think I can start from, wait. So real quick, thank you so much. So we got the first winner, the second winner. We're going to go to the bar. Let's just finish this out real quick. So, I want to just give some little running facts, okay? First of all, historical context. Redlining represents the beginning of the industrialized era. So before this, there was like America was a farm, and the high and all this infrastructure that got put in afterwards started because of the redlining that was done in the 50s. And this can also be
Climate crisis. Redlining primarily identified indigenous African American communities and then multicultural communities. So this means communities
allies. So like, like the Westend that everybody makes regardless
color or culture, those communities were attacked. Redlining spurred the creation of the zip codes. So the zip codes were created in 1961.
Redlining. So that gives you like a little bit of, it took time to develop all the highways and to do all the design. And that's what happened during that time. Then in Boston, down 60% of the indigenous African American community slaves and the South End. And then currently there's a 33 life expectancy between Back Bay and Roxbury. So that if these people same day. That means that if the person in Back Bay died today, the African American died in 1990. 1990. Think about that. That's like what? Bobby Brown? Who was the president back then? George H.W. or 89? Anyway, let's not. I wasn't alive then. Uh, just a question, honor our ancestors, and that is the number one thing that we want our students to get involved with. And they get so engaged when they start like thinking about it. I mean, you should see their eyes light up when you start talking about things that happen in their community. And so, like I told you, we teach project manager, but the cultural diversity, the ability to talk to many people and understand and get a lot from people, right? That's what will make you the great team leaders of tomorrow, is people who can talk to different people from different cultures. So a cultural hub, the existence of a variety of cultural ethnic groups within a society, and that's what the Westend was, right? To give you a little bit of scope of redlining, each dot represents a redlining map in the United States. So it shows you that it's a widespread practice. So every red that you see is mostly African Americans, but yes, like this community is redlined as well as the North End is redlined. So now these dots represent safe spaces. All right, that's very important to understand. In segregated America, going from place to place was not as simple as it is now. In fact, the people of those days in the south end of Boston, they could not travel to this part of the city. They could not travel. Well, they could travel to have something to do, but it's not like you could. It's not like you travel. So that's another thing. It's not like you just have, you can just really neatly go in about the city if you have nothing to do. All right. But you couldn't go to Carson Beach. If you were going to use the beach back then, you had to go to Nantasket, all right, an hour and a half away. So this green bit represents a lot of history that has not been told, because this represents the safe spaces that we had in our community. And if you wanted to travel, read this book so you can identify the safe spaces. All right. This is all about engineering, space. What are the space used for? Because there's a relationship between culture, land, and law. All right. When people live on a place, like they lived here in the West End, they develop a relationship with the land. They start developing culture on the land. They have landmarks and all sorts of great things that happen. Like, if you go to the North End, it's the first Roman Catholic church in America is there, right? So these are the things that you find, and you have space to practice your culture. And if you don't practice your culture, you cannot transfer it to the next generation. It's as simple as that. As simple as that. All right, so let's zoom in a little bit. So this is the redline map of Boston. Three major groups were affected, but there were more. So there were Irish here. I think also Irish here. But this is where we are in the North and West End. This is the South End. This is like over there by Roxbury, but this is the Irish community. This is the African American community, all in here. And this is the Jewish community. Jewish community was also affected. Now, unlike the other parts in the red zones, the Jewish community they did have, the historical evidence says they did have money and wealth accumulated in this area. And because of that, it must have been more difficult to move leaders and high positions, lawyers, you name it. You couldn't just push these people around. But the systemic interference with the prices, as well as like block busting, which is the practice of putting black people. Redlining basically made our skin degrade property values. If you moved into an area, that place would automatically go down. So these places also so much that when the people of color that lived there had to sell their houses, it wasn't even worth anything. I heard from a local historian, Marie Furman. She told me the other day, yesterday, that as soon as they had sold their houses, the property values went up like by 200%, like almost immediately. So it's an artificial depression based on this map and everybody following the system. So realtors weighing on it, whatever. But yeah, these are all where the historic sites for the indigenous. This was the Black Chinatown. All right, or the Black North End, whatever you want to say. It was a cultural hub full of soul food restaurants and jazz clubs and tailors and, like I said, hostels. I actually have a green book. I forgot to bring it up. We'll go about, I know you guys will look at it, but we'll see a lot of great businesses there. All right, more specifically, this is the Dudley Street Baptist Church that is located right across from Dudley today. Right, and if you can notice the police station there. So if you see here, right, this is where it happened. You can see the difference in the street. Right, the street used to go straight. It now has this little area here. These are some existing buildings. But what is really something about this? I talk about cultural rights. I advocate for the cultural rights of indigenous African Americans to be specially taken care of. Why? Because we're the only ones in the world that don't have a library of names that we get to select from and say, this is my name from this culture. We do not have the language. We do not have the language, the food, the music. Well, we have music, but now we need to talk about, before we talk about that music, that's what these spaces are for. Let's now take the church away from, let's take the religion away, right? Let's look at it as an engineer. As an engineer, this is a space. Okay? As an engineer, this is a space, and that space is used for music, right? The choir. So children of color had access to safe spaces, encouraging spaces where they could practice their culture. These spaces produced Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, Beyonce. These are the spaces, because remember, back then, we couldn't go to Berkeley. We couldn't go to the music school. So how did we become the best musicians of all time? It was because of these safe spaces that we had and remember, every one of those dots had loads of these safe spaces in them. So these were the networks that helped us develop our culture between slavery and the civil rights movement. But now we want to go to what we call cultural rights, where we start looking at ourselves as a community, not just as, I've been doing the Lives in Me, giving away the DNA test. And that is a cultural support, because African Americans don't know where they come from, and they don't have that grounding to any specific place. So it's like, where do you get started? Right, and because we're the only world that have this unique issue, we're the only. It's difficult for us to articulate, but this is the articulation. When you think of civil rights, think of like what happens in that courthouse. You can go over there, sign a registry, and you can basically get married, right? You're just married, you sign a piece of document. There's no culture involved, right? It's just simply technical. Right there on this site, there is a library. That library is a technical civil rights solution that gives us, but it's not culturally directed. It has no mention of the church that it literally sits on. Right? This church, this is a Boston Public School library Boston Public Library that millions of dollars have been spent to get it up, and it's perfect. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to be like I'm poo-pooing on civil rights. That library is very important. Our kids need it. It has a kitchen. It has lots of space. It's free. I did my there. It's very important, but it doesn't bring anybody to it because it's not culturally relevant. See, that the church is culturally relevant. You have to go there on Sunday, and grandma is going to be mad if you don't go. And you have to dress right, and you have to do what you got to do, right? You have to go take your clothes to the tailor because you got to go, right? With good shop on Sundays. Those spaces taught people how to cook. Right? How many of Monday's dinner, the Sunday breakfast at church, right? That's practicing how to cook. So if you do not have these safe spaces to practice your culture, which is what happened when 60% of this community was knocked down in the 60s. So once you down, the people in the 60s, right? We're talking about Aretha Franklin, the best musicians of all time. By the time we come to today, they have we did not have the ability to miss like we did because we did not have the space. All right. So these are some other artifacts that are still left over in our communities. This is the Maslet of Tefillah. I mess it up. I'm not gonna shut up. Y'all know what it is. And then these are some other ones that I found. These are all Jewish temples. Now, yellow lining is just as serious as redlining. I'm talking to a Jewish group on the 23rd, and that's my message because when I hear their conversations, these are the descendants of this group actually, and they want to find ways to come back. They want to understand, but they don't want to feel like because in a way they feel like they left Black people. So this community, they did not practice segregation. Well, not as widespread. Let me not be as, but they did not. There was love there. There were jobs and opportunities. So Black people in this country, in this city, could only go to Roxbury and parts of Dorchester where the Jewish people lived, and that was used against them. And eventually, they were pushed out of the communities, leaving all these cultural artifacts. And these are their original cultural artifacts, meaning when their people first came from the Europe, this is what they did. So this is like how. Like we're here. In fact, I always tell people, like, in building engineers, when we do two things at the same, that's us showing off, trying to say we can do it twice, right? That's pride. That's cultural joy. And for them to leave these communities means that whatever was pushing them out was very serious. And that's and they, like I said, they give themselves a little too much guilt, but I don't blame them. And there's a culture Jewish people exhibit when they're under oppression. They change their names. They did it in Europe, and they did it here because they were under oppression. It's not, so I try to, like, hey, calm down. Trust me. If everybody, you're not the one that need to be feeling any kind of way about anything. But our people in our community believe that they are racist and that's why they left. Right? But that's because engineers back then to explain this data to them. That's all. We're smart. Black people are very good in music, very good in sports, very good in law. We're like the best lawyers that man can find because we've had to fight law all since the beginning of time. All right. So now we go to West End, and I will let I've been talking so much. West End.
Yeah, so the West End, and I want to make sure that I say, because you mentioned at the beginning the statue of Bill Russell is this like one piece of Black history in City Hall Plaza, but there's another one, right? And it was saved by Boston's kind of great historian, right? Robert Whitehill, something Whitehill, and it's the Sears Crescent. So the reason the Sears Crescent was saved was because it was the offices for the Liberator, the William Lloyd Garrison's paper that where he worked with William Cooper Nell and others to kind of push what we would call the Overton window now to end slavery. And I don't know that that's what that building is, and because there's no marker there at all. Okay, is this? All right. Can you hear me now? Maybe? Yeah? A little better? So, yeah, I can hear that I can hear now. Yeah, so the Sears Crescent, also in Government Center, is this, it was the site of the Liberator for most of its history, where Garrison, William Cooper Nell, and a number of other white and Black leaders worked to end slavery. It's not marked at all. So it was saved specifically for that purpose because it holds that legacy. But because it's not marked,
Very few people know that it's there, and it's really sad. Especially because the effort that the historian Whitehill put into saving it was pretty. He went to. There's a very famous story of him going to the BPDA, the organization that tore down the West End, or BRA then, and actually just like screaming at them for hours to get them to ensure that building would be saved. And that's it's a significant part of the West End's history. Can you hear me now? Ish. Okay. All right. So, it's a really important part of the West End's history that it's founded as an urban community by Boston's Black community in around 1780. And from 1780 to 1880, it housed about 2/3 of Boston's entire Black community. In that time, the city changed a lot, and the Black community eventually left mostly of its own accord. But what they left behind was an established urban space that, and a small portion of their community that ultimately kind of seeded the diversity of the West End. Also, and I think it's very important to note for this kind of a talk, that after the Civil War, the West End became the only place to have an elected official between the founding of the city and the 1980s or 90s. There were 2 Black elected officials who represented the North Slope of Beacon Hill. They were both voted out of office by 1900, and there wouldn't be another Black elected official in Boston for almost a century. But that diversity did survive in the West End with the neighborhood's ward boss, the first ward boss in Boston's history, and the last. He was a long-lived figure, Martin Lamasdy. So Lamasdy has an interesting history for this because he's so powerful in the city, and he so defined the political strength of the West End that when he passed away in the 1930s, he left a vacuum that really left the West End vulnerable to its ultimate demise. But in the meantime, he was the only Irish ward boss in the city's history to appoint any non-Irish person to any position in the entire city government. He would appoint 2 people a year, 1 Black person, 1 Jewish person. And that was it. Those were the only 2 people in city government who weren't Irish. He also just is interesting in that he was the only ward boss in American history who is not documented to have been corrupt for whatever reason. Wow. But when he passed away, he left this vacuum of power in the West End, and he left a culture that had turned sort of inwards. So West Enders really identified with the West End, the entity of the West End as home. They didn't see their apartment as home. They didn't see their house as home. They saw the West End as home. And because of that, they saw everyone outside of the West End as sort of, a very other kind of scary. And so they entrusted politicians to kind of bridge that gap between their community and the outside community. But they also expected their politicians to be good West Enders, and that meant also not talking to anybody else. And it's an important lesson. As you look to preserve these spaces, you really need the support of your elected officials to do that kind of thing. And to get that support, you need to at least let them talk to other people for you. Anyway, you can start to see it here, but the West End after around 1880, 1900 became a space where that because people stayed. So in most neighborhoods in Boston, diversity was kind of monochrome, right? It was, you were Irish, you had an Irish neighborhood that became an Italian neighborhood that became a whatever. In the West End, people kept staying even as the broader community left. So a small number of Black people stayed when the Irish community came in. A small number of Irish people stayed when the Eastern European, mostly Jewish groups came in, and then those groups stayed as well as Italian, Polish, and Asian people came in. So the neighborhood retained all these different people, and because of that, it became the most ethnically diverse in the city's history. But because it was inward facing, it also became vulnerable to urban renewal. So in 1950, or in 1958, 48. Geez, my dates are messing up in my head. In 1948, James Michael Curley was mayor of Boston, and but he was also in prison simultaneously. And so Curley, while he was in prison, his lieutenant governor should have been, or his lieutenant mayor should have been the mayor of Boston. He did him a big favor. He appointed a non-political entity to come in and be mayor instead. And the person they picked was named John Hines. He was guaranteed the job of city clerk for life, as long as he did not run for political office. So Curley comes back after 3 months. It's Easter, so it's the Easter weekend. So he's got a couple of days. He's got a couple of days off. He comes back to the office on a Monday or Tuesday, and a reporter asks him, "Hey, how are things back in Boston, or back out of prison?" And he says, "Well, they're really good. In fact, I've done more in the 3 days I've been back than in the 3 months that I was gone." And it's the first time that John Hines' family ever sees him angry. He's screaming, and then when he calms down, he starts making phone calls. And the next morning, he's running for mayor of Boston. On its own, as a political story, it's incredible that Hines wins the race, but he does so with the support of a group of very young people who are dedicated to ending this kind of Curley era of what they see as corrupt politics. Now, it's worth noting that corrupt politics serves the kind of average person better than the non-corrupt politics that follows it, but at least less money is slipping out of city coffers into private hands. So Hines gets support from all these people, but the two that you really care about are a recent a veteran of World War II, John Collins, who becomes the next mayor, and a man, Jerry Rappaport, who graduates from Harvard Law School with a law degree at 21 and runs the youth outreach for the Hines campaign. Afterwards, Hines has promised this vision, a new Boston. He uses that term. It comes from an older movement. And once he wins the mayoralty, he has to figure out what it means, right? So yeah, I've promised you this whole new city, but I don't know how we're doing it. Like, I need to figure something out. And he's very lucky that as he's running for mayor, the federal government passes the Housing Act of 1949, which institutes slum clearance, the program that will later be known as Urban Renewal. So Hines selects Rappaport to do a few kind of special projects at mayor's office. And one of those special projects is writing the plan for urban renewal. This is a requirement to get funds. You have to tell the federal government what neighborhoods are problem areas and need to be removed. And he looks at the red line maps. Maybe he walks through the city, maybe not. And he ends up selecting areas of the city that he thinks should be demolished. Those include East Boston, Charlestown, the North End, the West End, most of the South End, most of Roxbury, most of Southie. It's about 50% of downtown Boston, about 30% of the entire city. And this goes back to the office and everyone says, yeah, that looks good. That's about right. Let's knock it down. So they do a little project in the New York streets, just a little area just south of South Station, 7 blocks. It goes pretty quickly. It's removed because it has too many grocery stores, which is an accepted sign of blight at the time. It's an accepted sign of blight because many grocery stores means many different types of people, right? So it's a good indication of diversity. And because diversity is a target of these programs, by eliminating grocery stores, you kind of know you're eliminating these diverse groups. So the city does that project, but they feel like it's a failure. And they feel like it's a failure because they aren't able to sell the land. So the land has to be sold to a private developer, and they can't find a buyer for the New York streets. It's really frustrating. So they look at around and they say, okay, so we're going to do a big project now, but we've learned our lesson. You need to pick land that will sell. So everyone agrees, right? North End is the project they want to do. They want to demo the North End. It is like accepted as the worst slum in the city. It probably still is somewhat genuinely a slum at this point. And fortunately for the North End, unfortunately for the West End, the North End is in a special position because it's on the other side of the central artery, the raised way that cuts the North End off from the rest of the city between 1952 and 1990. And because of that, the North End is seen as a place where investing is too risky. There's too good of a chance that no one's going to pay for the North End. The West End, on the other hand, is on this side of the central artery. It's right next to downtown. It's pretty close to Filene's, Jordan Marsh. It's right next to a new Museum of Science, which everyone's trying to sell. And it's right near Government Center, which they haven't announced yet, but the city knows is coming, and they know they want nice new buildings nearby. So they select the West End, and they start slowly moving towards demolition. In 1953, they announced the project mostly to donors in the West End. And unlike in the North End and many other parts of Boston, most of the landowners in the West End also lived in the West End. So they had been keeping up the buildings pretty well. The city tells them to stop doing maintenance on their structures because they're going to be torn down soon. And there's no point in maintaining a building, throwing money into it if it's going to be demolished. A couple of years pass and the city rezones the West End. It makes alleyway apartments illegal. These are still present throughout Boston today. They were illegal in the West End for a little while in the 1950s. Then in 1957, the city cuts garbage collection from 2 days a week to 1 day a week, and then from 1 day a week to no days a week, and then takes pictures. And they send those pictures and a report to the federal government, and they say, look, the West End is at like half occupancy. No one wants to live here. The buildings aren't being maintained because no one cares about it. The people are so dirty. They're so incapable of taking care of themselves that there's garbage everywhere. And by the way, we went to one building And we checked, half the people in that building had tuberculosis. So we can only assume that 50% of all West Enders have tuberculosis. The neighborhood is killing them. This has to be demolished. We have to demolish it to save these people. And the federal government says, okay, and funds a urban renewal project in the West End. And this project is functionally free. So the city is supposed to pay for about 30% of the project, but because Boston's very smart, it uses a provision of the law is that if you invest in the city around the project on projects that improve the future projects, i.e. improving roads or building a new school, that those expenses count towards your input into the urban renewal project. So Boston did a bunch of work around the West End that would have done anyway. All those clear black streets around it, I know it's a colorized photo, but they're so black. They were just repaved. They redid every street around the project. They did all this stuff to ensure that they were basically going to have to put nothing actually into paying for demolition. And in fact, for the New York streets, the West End, Government Center, Roxbury, Charlestown, and the South End projects, the city of Boston paid in total only $75,000. Everything else came from the federal government. So okay. So the federal government has approved these plans in 1958, and the city's ready to start demolition. But there's a man on Beacon Hill, Joseph Lee Jr., who's been involved in the West End for a long time, and he sees the writing on the wall. He's a Beacon Hill Brahmin, right? Yeah. Yeah. We're just across the street from that. Yeah. So Lee reaches out to the West Enders and he says, it's going to get demolished. It really is happening this time because there have been these plans a number of times that have been floated. People don't really believe it's going to happen. You have to fight back. And he helps the West Enders form this group, the Committee to Save the West End, which pushes back as a grassroots campaign and tries to get the city to stop the project. And they are so successful that the city actually publicly acknowledges that they were wrong, that the West End isn't a slum, that it's not a bad place to live, and that they probably shouldn't be demolishing it. Unfortunately, paperwork's already been signed, so we're demolishing it anyway. Sorry, goodbye. And so the West End gets knocked down. For 10% of West Enders, they're given $100 in compensation. But the other 90% are considered lost. That means they find housing without the assistance of the city. If you find housing without the assistance of the city, you don't get tracked for statistical analysis from the government's perspective for the rest of the project. So the government says, hey, we helped 100% of 10% of West Enders find homes. We don't know what happened to the other 90%. Can't count them. So 100% success rate. I think they reported 99% success rate. That's pretty good. Then they say, okay, well, what if you have a business that's shut down because we knocked down the building your business was in? Well, you're entitled to $2,500 then. But if, and you'll get that money if when you move your business, you have a new address. But if your business closes, there's nowhere to send a check to, so sorry, I can't pay you. So if you don't need the money, you get it, but if you needed it, you're out of luck. And this is sort of because the community is demolished, because it's so centered around this kind of network of people. Once the West End starts to be demolished, it's cleared out very. In fact, the project, the demolition part of the project is supposed to take 3 years, and it's done in 18 months at half the time because people clear out so quickly. And then it's just empty. And like its predecessor in the New York streets, it doesn't sell. It sits empty for 2 or 3 years, and then finally the city works out a deal where before the man who selected the West End for demolition receives a rental on it to redevelop it as he had envisioned. And he doesn't do that. There's no school in the West End today. He promised to build one. The affordable housing units that were supposed to be in the West End were either never built or were only half of the buildings are affordable. But it was eventually rebuilt. It took 35 years. And because of the way that urban renewal is set up, every acre of the West End was sold for $60,000. In 1960, each of those acres, 52 acres, were worth $1 million. And when the last ones were sold in the 1980s, they were worth $10 million and up. This is why urban renewal is seen as part of as the greatest wealth redistribution from the poor to the wealthy in American history. And it's there's a beautiful kind of phrasing of this. I think it's in I think it's by Jane Jacobs that says it's the it is a system which allows the poor to subsidize the developments of the rich. That we look at it, people always sold urban renewal as so inexpensive, as so cheap, as we're saving money, we're doing all this stuff. And it's like they weren't saving money, they were saving government money, and at the expense of the people who were being removed. So what we were left with at the end was this empty lot, and then a series of luxury condos and apartment buildings, which are what we have in the West End today. They are very poorly planned. It is the only city beautiful development that was ever built anywhere on earth, unfortunately, because City Beautiful is not a beautiful city movement. It's like really hard to fix now. It's not built to support a community at all. And one of the things I'll end on as also president of the Civic Association, right, is that towers are really tough, right? Towers are tough to build community in, and but they do provide density. So in a functioning, dense urban neighborhood, modern, dense urban neighborhood, you'd have all these big towers and they'd be closely packed together, and they'd support a ton of businesses that could only exist in a place where so many people existed with so many different interests that, you know, there were enough people to support a button store, you know, whatever. The modern West End has 50% of the density of the neighborhood that you see here. Despite the towers, despite the height, it literally half the people live here today. And by the way, it also collects like half the tax revenue that it used to.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So this is why urban renewal projects are almost always seen as failures. They never met these like basic requirements, which were house more people and produce more tax revenue. And in fact, very ironically, in the end, the only universally accepted urban renewal successful urban renewal project, which is also here in Boston with Quincy Market, is the only one that really changed very little about the space. It just kind of provided to renew an identified space that already had this kind of cultural identity that people already wanted to go to. And that infusion was really valuable. We shouldn't write it off just because it came from the program, but it is amazing that the refurbishment is the only part of a program based on demolition that ever worked.
Well, thank you for that. That was wonderful. I mean, I always take my breath away just to see like the whole and like once this is throughout strikes and businesses and families. So
it's important to know too, almost all of these buildings, at least half of them were multi-use. So they're housing people on 3 or 4 stories, or 4 or 5 stories, but they're also providing space for businesses, communities.
On the bottom floor, yeah.
A ton of little synagogues, 55 little synagogues. So they're, yeah, and it just disappeared like this. This is my favorite image of the demolition, is this burning.
Yeah.
Where you can just see this space that it was so alive, just gone, and it just stays empty for so long. These pictures are actually of the Government Services Center, which is right across the street from us here. Today it is the least used part of the neighborhood. It's just a dead space. It is the only Paul Rudolph building which is universally accepted to be a failure. It's a mental health facility where the walls are in the shape of knives pointing out at you, even on the inside. It's amazing. Like, these spaces are so empty now. And you can just, these pictures of the neighborhood sort of receding away into what is now this just dead space they're so powerful. Yeah. Yeah, this picture actually may be taken standing on Merrimack here. Yeah.
I guess it's an opportunity to thank everybody that has been staying. So run subscription to African American TV because we do these for free, but we also have a lot of bills to pay. So we will appreciate you if you participate in that. And yeah, thank you again, Westend Museum. We hope to do more. We're definitely going to bring some open, but if not, we'll find something to do together. So thank you once again for tuning in on African American TV, and with that, we are out.